I can truthfully say alcohol put me where I'm at today.
I came here because of drinking, because I was in a drunk driving accident.
I've been incarcerated for nearly 6 years. The contributing factor of alcohol was that I was intoxicated at the time, and I believe that that led to what I had done.
I started drinking when I was about 6, 7 years old.
I grew up, my mother's father is Medicine of a tribe, and so I grew up really traditional. My father was an alcoholic, and so he got my mother drinking, and it was just growing up to all night hearing them party, drinking. I remember thinking, I'm like, I don't want to be like them.
I started at about the age of 8. It became a part of my everyday usage as much as I could get it. Probably by the time I graduated from high school, I was full-fledged alcoholic.
And that's why I'm in prison today, because of my drinking, alcohol, DWIs.
Sometimes this is the only place that somebody's gonna get AA, that it can, maybe the light will go on. Because they're not running around, they're sober, they're in a controlled environment, and they got a chance to get, meetings consistently, and that's a big deal.
I've been in and out of prison or jail, and the last time I got drunk. I had too much, and a man's life was taken, and I was to blame for it.
Looking back, I had 25, 26 years of everything I'd stuffed down inside me that I wasn't willing to talk about, I wasn't willing to deal, that I tried to hide with alcoholism. Ended up getting in an argument with my dad, and I ended up murdering him that day.
The fact is, I wouldn't have been there if I hadn't been drinking, and I wouldn't have crashed if I hadn't been drinking. I don't remember the instance exactly, but I do remember everything else with clarity. And my daughter said, "What happened?" I said, "We had an accident. Are you okay?" She said, "Yeah, I'm okay." And I went to look to see if Emily was okay. I said, "Are you okay?" And she wasn't. She had come between my daughter and me and smashed her head on the dashboard, and she was killed instantly. And life changed on a dime. It was morning, we were going out to the beach, and I had a vodka and orange juice in a glass, and I poured it into a plastic tumbler walking out the door, and my girlfriend, who was about 10 years ahead of me in recovery, said to me, "You taking your orange juice to the beach?" And I said, "Yeah," and she started to laugh. She said, "You're a piece of work." And I said, "What do you think? You think it's time I went to one of those meetings?" And she said, "Oh baby, it was time years ago." And that was July. And I crashed in September. And I guess one of the things that I know today about AA is it's attraction, not promotion. Nobody was dragging me to a meeting. Do I wish I went in July? Probably, but I don't know if I would have stayed. The first person I ever said those words, "I'm Anne-Marie and I am an alcoholic," to was the arresting officer at the scene. And it boggled my husband's mind. He kept saying, why would you say that? You would never say it before. And I said, sometimes when I say it today, even at meetings, I usually just say, "Hi, I'm Anne-Marie and I'm an alcoholic." Sometimes I say, "I'm Anne-Marie, I am an alcoholic." Because the intonation in my voice that night, because I do remember it when I talked to the cop, was I said, "I am an alcoholic. People have warned me before." And that quote was, put in every legal document and news story. Like, why would she drive? Why would she drink and drive? She knew it. She knew it, but it was just so much a part of the denial, and the denial was just ripped away when I saw the devastation I had caused.
Yeah, my day started like 3 a.m. I would wake up, get myself together, and start drinking beers before I went to work, before I had to be at work at 6 a.m. It caused me to lose jobs, be behind on my bills. I done been homeless a couple of times because of alcohol. Lost many jobs, failed relationships, failed marriage also. Alcohol caused me to be a neglectful parent because, I spend more time drinking than I did with my children. And I regret it. And, I turned to a life of crime because of alcohol. I'm gonna just say insufficient funds caused me to want to go out and rob people because I couldn't get a drink, or I wasn't trustworthy enough for people to loan me money to get alcohol. But I turned to a life of crime, started robbing people, hurting people, and I felt it was okay.
The first time I drank and was like 12 years old. I ran down the street, came back, and I went to grab my drink and chug it, and it was horrible, but then it hit me like bam, and I don't know, I wanted to get drunk ever since. It was bad, like I was the youngest person who was like, detox was my home away from home.
I didn't know it at the time, but I was an alcoholic drinker right from the start. I drank alcoholically. There would be three guys hanging out, and there was 4 beers left, and I knew I had to finish this one, drink one more down, and then we could split the remaining 3, because there was 3 of us, 4 beers, I was gonna get 2 of them, and that's the way an alcoholic thinks, and I didn't realize it at the time. So it caused problems in my life. I was kicked out of school at the age of 16, and also at the age of 16, I ended up in the county jail for the first time, on an alcohol-related offense. Just about all of my arrests, I have an extensive arrest record. Every time I was under the influence, that I can think of.
My granddaddy was an alcoholic, and I used to slip in his bottle of liquor when he would be drunk on the weekend, and I liked the effects. And at 6, 7 years old, right on up to 9, I grew up on a farm, and at 9 years old, we could buy beer and alcohol from the country stores back then. And so I drank pretty heavy right on up 9 years old to 16. So I didn't know it at that time, but I probably was already an alcoholic at the age of 16. And I continued to drink for the next 35 years. And as time went on, my alcoholism got worse.
I had to go to a sales meeting at the dealership that I worked for, but I woke up and I really wanted to take a drink. I just had that Monday morning taste that I wanted to take a drink. And so I go through the sales meeting, and I remember looking outside the window. I was on the 2nd floor, and I said to myself, don't get in any trouble today. Because the last few times I drank, there were some really significant consequences. And so I said, don't get in any trouble today. And I left the sales meeting. Once I left the sales meeting, I knew I didn't have to be back at the dealership for about 3 hours. 1 o'clock is when I needed to be back. And so I left, I bought some alcohol, I started to drink, and the craziness set in. And 3 hours later, 3 hours, 10 minutes later, I look at my watch and it's 10 after 1. And I knew then and there that I was in some trouble, because I was about 20 minutes away from the dealership. And the way that I looked, you knew that I'd been drinking, and I was on a no drink, no drug contract, meaning I was going to be fired. And I was basically on a no drink, no drug contract at home. I wasn't going to be able to come home. And so I looked up, and there was a bank. And I went another block, there was another bank, and I pulled in. And I remember seeing on some of the cable television stations, people going in with a note and robbing a bank. And my thought process was, if I rob this bank, then I'll have the courage enough to jump off that bridge, because I was dead. I was just so tired of the way that I was living, but I was so scared to carry out the whole suicide thing, but I didn't want to go to prison. So I thought, if I go in there, and all of this thinking took place in about 30 seconds. Went in, handed the note to the teller, and I robbed that bank.
My obsession with alcohol, it makes me feel a different person, the person I don't want to be, my skin, just, I don't know how to explain it, but it's an obsession that makes me be another person that I don't like either. Mi alcoholismo empeoró al punto de que perdí mi hogar y perdí mi apartamento y tuve que vivir abajo de un puente, y pues desde ahí he estado viniendo y saliendo de la cárcel.
And I would always go in my father's pants pocket at night and give me some change. I would get somebody in the neighborhood that I knew that was a little older, well, much older than me. They would go to the liquor store. My drinking progressed when I got to be 15, and behind it, all that drinking, I was doing some of the same things my father was doing. I was fighting with women, we screaming and shouting, cursing each other out, and fighting, me and my brother fighting, we getting drunk in my mother's backyard fighting, barbecues, we fighting each other. And eventually some of my family members had told me, you need some help. You know, you can't remember you getting drunk, throwing bricks through people's windows. You don't remember what you done did the next day. But my drinking didn't stop there. I switched over at the age of 21, I switched over. I went to whiskey and left the wine alone. I said, well, maybe if I switched my drinking. And my drinking just progressed. I started drinking just anything you drink, I drink.
Being in prison on a domestic case, one of the facilitators asked me, is alcohol by any chance related to domestic violence? And I had to stop and think about it for a second, and I came back to my cell and I called my ex-wife that night and I asked her, I said, do you think alcohol was ever related to my violence? And she said, well, yeah, John, because sober you were the best guy in the world. You worked, you took care of your family, you did everything you could. But she said the minute you started drinking, you become violent, you no longer cared for people around you. And I just, it was funny how it's like a switch all of a sudden got turned on in my head. Like, I knew this all along, but I never recognized it. You know, it's part of like I knew it, but I never recognized it. You know, that alcohol was so directly connected with domestic violence. Like, wow, when I look back, I go, you know, the danger I put my kids in under the influence of alcohol, the danger I put my wife in. Sometimes it just took one conversation like that to bring it out.
I realized that I needed a solution, but I didn't have one. You know, I didn't have one at all, and I felt lost.
I remember I was in the jail. I was in a cell, and I prayed to God. You know, I didn't want to go do the time that they were going to give me and that they were talking about giving me, you know, but I didn't want to go home neither. I didn't want to go back out the gate and go back out to that life neither, you know, and I'm not the type of guy who can commit suicide. I'm not a violent person like that, you know, but I wanted to die. I remember asking God to take me and said, please, I just don't want to be here anymore. You know, I've done all I wanted to do down here. I've seen all I want to see, and there's nobody left down here talking to me anyway, so you might as well take me, you know. So, but it didn't happen. It ended up, I woke up again, and I stayed alive, and I ended up back in that treatment dorm again, you know, and this time I listened.
I lived in Miami, and it's pretty much a melting pot, so being Spanish was, you know, that was majority there. I had no idea what an AA meeting was. I never heard of AA. I'm dumbfounded. I mean, I just ignorant, never heard of it, never in my life. I don't have nothing better else to do. I mean, I'm sitting with lifeless 15 years. Heck, I don't have nothing better else to do, you know. So I just told him, okay. The speaker happened to be another inmate, and he started talking, and as soon as he started talking, all of a sudden, this guy was just talking about me. I knew that for the first time there was something in that meeting.
I just said, I didn't know what was going to happen or if I was going to be able to do it or whatever, but I knew I needed a change, and I said, I'm going to just give it a shot, you know, and I ended up with a 9-year prison sentence. And I went up to the prison and I contacted AA. I wrote to them and I said, I know I'm alcoholic, I need help, you know, and they had somebody write to me. The guy sent me literature, and I started reading, you know, and I opened the big book, and it had some profound things in there that really related to me.
I believe AA has brought me more in touch with my higher power. I've always had it growing up. I was always higher power is a broad thing, you know, and I feel that I'm going to use God, and this has brought me through all these struggles in my life for a reason. Maybe just to share my story to somebody, a young adolescent, a girl that's going through things. Who knows? I feel like He tells me this, you know, and I would like to use that and take it to my advantage.
But I had never, until this last time being incarcerated and going and following some suggestions and getting a sponsor and going through all the steps, I had never done a thorough fourth step before. And even with that, it led to just a continuation of finishing them all, which was like, wow, what a load off. And it just really took away a lot of crap that I would dig up and have self-pity about and pointing the fingers at everyone else, and never really took responsibility or was accountable for the things that I had done to myself to cause this sickness.
One of the things I learned in sobriety and through working the steps was that the only thing, life was really unmanageable. I mean, you know, when you're sitting in prison away from your 4 kids and, you know, you're making 17 cents an hour, and you know, people are telling you when to get up, when to eat, when to shower, when to move from place to place. You don't have control over a lot of things. You have control, I have control over how I choose to do that time. And I sat in my anger for a few days, and then I just said, okay, you know, maybe there's a reason I gotta be here.
Step 4 and 5 played a big role in my recovery, because I'm starting to understand and realize that step 4 and 5 helps me to get over some resentments that I had, right? And I'm starting to learn through the program, through AA and through Alcoholics Anonymous, that resentment destroys people. And how they destroy people is from the inside out. And what I mean by that was, when I was going through my stage of alcohol abuse, I built up some resentment because I was so self-centered, so egotistical, that I blamed a lot of people for my mistakes. And I'm starting to realize that I have to be responsible and take accountability for my own life. And so when you go through step 4 and 5, this makes you take a deeper look, examination inside of yourself, where you have to really question yourself. And not only question yourself, but you got to come up with some answers about a lot of things, a lot of deep, dark secrets that I've been holding inside of me.
When I get to step 4, step 5 in prison, that was extremely hard for me because I wasn't willing to share. I was so closed up. I just sugar-coated it. I didn't really dig down in anything, but I was so proud of myself that I had done something. I thought I really accomplished it. But over the next couple of years, I started speaking with the VICs as they come in. I actually started speaking with a couple of the other inmates in the program and realized that I had to start opening up. And it was when I actually started looking at all the fears, those insecurities, how I had harmed people. I realized that I've got to start admitting to those, start taking accountability, start being responsible for those. And it was actually when I sat down and shared it with another person and actually spoke it, it really started to hit me and impact me that this is who I was and these are the things that I had done. Then in prison, I was always so easy for me to say, well, I can't do the amends. I'm in here. I can't do these things while I'm in here. So I just always tried to push those things away. I started to push them off to where I didn't have to do anything. But I could make the amends in prison. I'm very grateful today I made the amends with my grandmother and my mother before they passed away. I had to make amends with my wife and girls so they could become a part of my life again. Some people, I had no idea where they were. My father, I murdered him. The VIC that I'd worked with, later on become my sponsor, told me to write a letter to him. And I sat down and wrote a letter. And that's how I made amends to my dad. was I talked to him, explained to him that I realized that just because I felt like I needed that pat on the back, because I needed his approval, the man loved me more than I understood. It just wasn't in the way that I thought it should be. It was in his own way. But for me at that time when I was drinking, I didn't want to see that. I didn't want to see how he cared for me.
But I know that something stronger than me has to be able to help me through this, because me by myself, it's not gonna happen. So I'm gonna have to draw off the strength of everybody else in AA and my higher power. And that's the only way that I'm gonna stay out of jail.
My favorite step at this point is the 12th step, because now I get to go and help someone else. And in helping them, I'm helping myself. Because I routinely have to get out of myself. I have to get, this is a process. It's not something that happens overnight. I didn't just go through the 12 steps and a miracle occurred. It's happening every day.
One of the guys who I thought just the other day came up to me in the gym and just said to me, "Man, how do you stay so?" And I told him, he said, "Calm and all this." And I told him I'd say the Serenity Prayer in the morning. I say it at the end of the day. I read my reflections book in the morning. And I said, that gives me a way to just start the day. And then I take it from there. I don't know how tomorrow will be, but I do that every day. And he said, wow. He goes, and he asked me, and I showed him the reflections book, and the other day he told me he got it. So you can never know. It's all about suggestions. I'm finding that works for me as well. I'm never going to tell anyone what to do.
What I like about the big book is that if you read it and you're a real alcoholic, you can't deny that what's in that book is true. You can't. I mean, I can't, and I'll be truthful with myself, you know. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path.
I like the daily reflection and the grapevine. I really associate with the stories in there that that lets me know I'm not alone, because I was an alcoholic. I always drank alone, and that's why a lot of my anger and rage that I've had bottled up was always against those I usually loved, because they were always close to me. So whenever I read these stories of other people who were alone, it helps me realize that I wasn't alone. And even with my spiritual life growing, now I realize that I'm never alone.
You know, if you're honest with yourself and with other people, you get more respect that way. They tend to respect you, you respect them, and it just helps me accept people for who they really are, where they're at, you know, because we're not all in the same place in this walk in life.
That Monday night, this still amazes me. A man in AA invited me into his home 3 days after I'd been in prison for 21 years to have dinner with him and his family and 2 other guys from the AA program. This guy had a brand new baby, 6 months old, and I'm sitting here in the back of my mind thinking, why would anyone invite somebody like me into their home that they don't know and offer them dinner? And I realized that the AA program was showing me what real friends were.
I'm gonna be honest with you, my life right now is better than it ever been in my lifetime. I would not trade what I got today for all the money in the world.
The word is freedom. It's freedom. I enjoy life today. You know, my great grandmother once told me, live every day as though it's the only day that you got. And I didn't understand that then. I do now.
And I held on to that, and I had a lot of faith in it, and I didn't budge from it. I stayed on the path while I was in there, and I did everything that I could to remain principled in an unprincipled place.
Boys all had life sentences, and with not a chance of knowing if they ever get out. And I saw the happiness that they had in their life, and I wanted that same thing that they had. And I didn't have it 9 to 11 years. So I knew if they could find with their life services, I sure find it with 9 to 11 years. And that's what I did. And I found the same thing they found all through practicing the AA program. It's that simple.
You know, when I got a meeting list and a bicycle, and I went to AA meetings, and they called me Bicycle Billy for like the next year and a half until I got my license. And just doing the right thing, the next right thing, and going to meetings. The people in AA said, it's okay, you got a place to stay, it's all right, just don't drink, everything's gonna be okay. And it turned out to be okay. That was 13 years ago.
The correction correspondent program, even though I'm eligible for meetings on occasions here, some people might not be able to at some of these institutions. And I'm only having a meeting, say, once a week. Well, even though I might have a handle on working the program to a certain degree now, and I definitely got some sobriety under my belt, once a week, you know, if you're really serious about your program, you're going to want to maintain it. So with my AA program, I want as much fellowship as possible, whether it be me absorbing information and getting some pat on the back for doing something I'm supposed to be doing, or for me to share it with somebody to maybe kick them in the butt and get them in the group somewhere in their neighborhood they need to be going to. But it's a fellowship. That's how I look at it. Like I said, you got to give it away to keep it. So that's how you're doing it. Every time I help somebody, it just refreshes in my mind the things. As long as I utilize what I tell them. I mean, I can't be telling you something and not doing it myself. That just don't make any sense. But that happens a lot of times.
Don't let the language barrier to be something that is going to hinder you, you know, because there is what I call a language of the heart, that we have something in common. You know, they have their certain readings, whatever, you could kind of go along. But one thing is that when I go into those meetings, I don't have no desire to drink. I don't even think about it.
The alcohol is it's not a part of my culture.
My favorite passage is this. I think it's in Promise. It say, no matter how far down the scale we're gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. I like sharing. And that's what that does. That's telling me about sharing. And it's telling me also about, I can relate to it because in my alcoholic state, man, I done did some things that I never would have did if I was in my right state of mind. And I know other alcoholics, when I hear their story, they basically say the same thing. You done heard of people selling themselves, stealing, robbing, killing. In that state, in an alcoholic, it reminds me of me because I have went really far down the scale. But it brings me back up because it says no matter how far down the scale you're going, you will see how your experience can benefit others. And that's why I like AA, because I get to share my story and hoping that my story helps another person. And I also start understanding too, there'll be some guys that come into AA and they won't say a word at first. But then guys start to realize that everybody in life going through the same things. We all going through the same problem. We're scared to speak on it. So when I share my story, I see how it benefits others. I done been to meetings where a guy sat in there a year, 6 months and didn't say a word. Then one day they just start talking and they won't even shut up.
I tell other inmates in Canada to give this program a try because you never know, it might help you.
I got to say this here. My daughter is 24 years old. She called me Tony for 20 years. Today, my daughter called me Dad. She writes me every week and says, "Dear Dad, I love you. Dad, I'm glad I can count on you." And as I said, my ex-wife, my best friend today, all because of this program.
AA has changed my life completely. Everything has changed. It's not just, there's more to it than me not drinking anymore. Just the peace that has come with the change of lifestyle is, I'm certain it's gonna get better.